Like many of you, watched the events this week, waiting for them for weeks and weeks to see how things would turn out. And I noticed in the news that a lot of the journalists kind of concluded that there was a little something for everyone in the elections on Tuesday. By that, they meant that both the Republicans and conservatives got some victories, and the Democrats and liberals got some victories as well. The other way to look at that is that there was a little something for everyone to be disappointed in, too. So this is kind of one of those things that divides the crowd. You know, are you an optimist or are you a pessimist? Now, so I just wanted to run through some things. There's nothing here tonight that you don't already know, but it's just a reminder from time to time to encourage ourselves. Before I do this, in case you don't know, I'll tell you my own personal political bias so that you can factor that in if you feel like you need to. I'm a conservative, and I tend to vote on that side of the fence. All right, so you can factor that in all of this. But this really isn't about political opinions. It's about bigger things. Look at this outline with me. And the first one has, don't go to it yet, Wesley.
Okay, thanks.
It says be blank and blank. And I bet you can probably guess almost every blank in this outline. What is it we should be as Christian citizens?
Servants.
Oh.
It's pretty hard to come by, especially both at the same time. Those are all good, but the thing that, related to voting though, we should be what?
Highest.
Nice. Okay, active and knowledgeable, that's coming pretty close. What did you say, Rich? Thank you, that's the word right there. That's the word that I put. Be informed. You know, don't just vote, don't flip coins or go by your feeling or vote the way your dad did, unless he's a Republican. I'm sorry. Be informed. You know, even the parties change over time. The longer you live, the more you notice that. Be informed in what? Vote. Be informed and vote. So there's your first sentence. As Christian citizens, we need to be informed and vote. We should be able to defend our vote. We should be able to say, here's why I voted the way that I did. Number two is going to be, don't put it up yet, measure. Well, she's gone, so I don't guess she will be. Oh, there she is.
I was writing.
You never know what's going to happen back then. Measure all policies and platforms by. Okay, you all said pretty much the same thing. I put God's words, so the Bible, biblical principles, any of that would work. Measure all policy platforms. Now, that sounds easy, but what most voters measure policies and platforms by really is what will benefit them the most, or their group. And it's hard sometimes to separate ourselves from that. But as Christians, we should be willing to measure policies and platforms, not by what we want or what we think will benefit us personally, but by what is measures up to God's word. Number three, blank in the government if God calls you to do so. Okay, absolutely right. If God calls you to serve, then serve. But remember that it's difficult to, I hate to have to say this, but it's difficult to maintain your integrity and serve in the government. One of the reasons it's hard for Christians to serve in the government is because the government always requires what? Compromise, absolutely. That's just the nature of leading a large group of people, and we're talking about over 300 million people in the United States. And to keep that herd going in the same direction, you're going to have to make some compromises. And when you don't, you get a lot of division and things begin to gum up. So the nature of leadership in government is compromise. It makes it hard for a man or a woman of integrity to last very long. Daniel's a great example in the Old Testament of a man of great integrity and strong faith who was very high up in the government, but a careful read of the book of Daniel shows that he only lasted so long. Later in the book, and we get to about chapter 5 or so, and there are people in charge who don't even remember who he is, and he's still alive. So even Daniel apparently reached a place, and we're not told what happened in the book of Daniel, where he was no longer in power. So this is, I would say that it's a calling for believers to serve in governments. If we're not called to that, then praise the Lord. Next sentence, don't blank over day-to-day political skirmishes. I took the word obsess. Yeah. You got it. Don't obsess over day-to-day political skirmishes. Some of you need to turn your TV off, okay?
Amen.
Or watch some children's programming or something, you know? Clean the brain out, you know? When Karen and I have watched something on TV and we're like, wish we hadn't watched that, or I don't know why we watched that to the end, we're like, well, we need to clean our brains out with something. And that's when we go to Netflix and watch a little bit of Andy Griffith. Yes. 30 minutes of Andy Griffith and I'm good to go to bed. You know, wash all that other stuff out of there. But really, watching politics day after day for hours and hours, don't do it. You don't need that much politics. You know, you can keep up without watching it constantly and obsessing on it. That's too much negativism. They're actually trying to keep you. They're trying to keep you all stirred up, so they'll keep watching their programs and buy their products. So don't obsess. All right. Always remember that our blank will never come from Washington, D.C., any state house, or any local town council. Our blank will never come from those places. What? Absolutely. Our salvation will never come from Washington, D.C., or any other governments. Now, we can expect things from our government. That's not what I'm saying, but we certainly can't expect our salvation. That comes from God. Next one. Always remember that our blank are not flesh and blood. All right, you got the Bible verse there from Ephesians chapter 6. When you run into a political enemy and they upset you, remember, that person really isn't your enemy. It's the powers that are animating that person that stand behind their ideas that you believe are wrong. That's the enemy. So we shouldn't attack people. People are bearers of souls which have inestimable value to God. That soul that you're running into, getting angry about, could be converted next week and be one of the most powerful advocates for the things you believe in. You never know. And so we want to treat people with respect, even when we disagree with them, and realize that they are not our enemies. Satan is our enemy. And then finally, we're about to come to a classic text on Sunday mornings as we go through the book of Matthew in chapter 22, verse 21. This is the events that we've begun to read about today. Probably all happened on Tuesday of that week that led to Jesus' passion. Sunday was the day that he came into the city. Monday was probably the day. None of them tell us this. These are educated guesses. Monday was probably the day that he went into the temple and turned over the money changers' tables and drove out those selling the doves. And then Tuesday, when he came back, is when he was confronted, as we saw this morning, by the religious leaders. In that confrontation, Matthew is going to give us a lot about for the next couple of chapters or so, chapters 22 and 23. And then in chapter 24, Jesus is going to talk to his disciples about the fact that the temple is going to be destroyed. So there's several chapters that we're coming up to with a lot of great teaching. And in these confrontations that Jesus has with the religious leaders, one of the questions they ask is, should we pay taxes? You know, specifically, should we pay taxes to the Romans? Again, they think they've cornered Jesus and put him into a spot where no matter how he answers, that he's going to indict himself somehow. But Jesus gives us a foundation for understanding the relationship between religion and government that you and I have embraced, and our forefathers did, who came to this country. What's the iconic statement that he's going to make? I like the way Jack uses the King James words. It just adds some power to it. Render. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. And so that becomes the basis for the separation, what we would call the separation of church and state. That these two have their own realms, and that they shouldn't intersect. Okay? In daily life, working that out can be messy, but hanging on to that principle is important. And Christianity, by the way, is unique in this idea, and you should know this. And Baptists particularly are champions for this idea, more so than Methodists, Presbyterians, Lutherans, and they may have come on board with us, but we were first at the table. Baptists were when it comes to a pure understanding of the separation of church and state. So this last sentence is Caesar, or the government, deserves our what and our what? Okay, support's a good, they're going to get our support one way or the other. I put the word respect, all the words that you said would be good, and also put another word that we're told specifically in the Bible to what for all of our leaders? To pray. So the government deserves our respect and our prayer. Can you respect somebody that you disagree with? We can disagree with the position and we can respect the person. Something that we're kind of maybe losing a little bit right now. We need to kind of regain that. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. We respect the person and the position, the presidency or the governor or whatever it may be. But that doesn't mean that we have to agree with the position or the policy. That's an idea that is being eroded in our culture, not just in government. It's being eroded in pop culture, because in pop culture, we're being told that if we disagree with a person's position on human sexuality, for instance, that our disagreement constitutes what? Hate speech. Hate speech. Absolutely. So our culture is a turning point where it seems to be losing the idea of public debate. Our forefathers, and for generations, we understood that living in a world with other people requires a public discourse. It requires a public debate where we disagree with each other and we figure out ways to live together even though we disagree. And we've kind of entered an era where it's a winner-take-all. Either one side completely wins and obliterates the other side, or the opposite. The opposite takes place. And so we can't disagree with anybody without being called hateful. Caesar deserves our respect and our prayers. God deserves our blank and our blank. What would those be? Did you say worship? Okay. Lives. I heard the lives part. There's a lot of things we can put in these two sentences. Here's what I put. God deserves our worship and our obedience. So Caesar deserves our respect and our prayers. God deserves our worship and our obedience. There's time even to disobey the government, right? And that's a long, venerable tradition in our culture too. Civil disobedience, when a group feels like the government is wrong about a particular issue, it's acceptable to take to the streets. And that was one of the freedoms that our forefathers fought and died for us to have, because in the old world you didn't do that. The king would come out, bring soldiers, and end the protest. We came over here and said people should be able to gather together and they should be able to protest against the government peacefully when they disagree. Peacefully, respectfully, and maybe even sometimes engage in civil disobedience. In the Bible, there's an example of civil disobedience for a spiritual reason. It's in the book of Acts. Who remembers what it is? It's a classic. It's early in the history of the church. Jamie?
They were told not to speak about Jesus, but in essence, not talk about the gospel, and they had to obey God.
That's exactly right. The same body of men who killed Jesus, or at least led to his death, the Sanhedrin, arrested Peter and his companions and told them to stop talking in the name of Jesus. And Peter engaged in an act of civil disobedience and demonstrated that there are things that we cannot obey. We respect our government and we pray for our leaders, but there are certain things that we have to disobey. When God's commands on our life intersect with or are not the same as the commands of the government, we have to choose between the two when they conflict. And Peter is telling us by his example that we must choose God. In this case, to witness. So if the government outlaws witnessing, then we would have to break the law. Ooh, that's a bad example. Because I'm not sure the government even needs to outlaw witnessing at this point. I don't know that the church is very engaged in witnessing much. But there are places in the world where it is illegal to tell somebody about Jesus, to try to proselytize is the word they like to use, to try to convince somebody to leave one religion and to adopt another one. But that's another freedom that our forefathers fought and died so that we would have. All right, so don't stress out. I started watching politics when I was 19 years old. I can remember the moments that I did. I was in the cars on my way to work. It was early in the morning. It was in 1979. And there was a story came on the radio about the helicopters in the desert in Iran that had crashed. Jimmy Carter was the president, and it was an attempt to rescue our people who were being held captive by the Iranians and had been for a long time. It was everywhere in the news. It was a big deal, and it brought Jimmy Carter's presidency down. He became a one-term president for that reason and others as well. And Ronald Reagan took his place. But I remember hearing that story on the radio, and I was just a 19-year-old kid bouncing around having a good time. But when I heard that, it really impressed me. I said, who is running right now? And I needed to know more about what's going on. And so I began to listen and pay attention. So I've been paying attention now for however many years that is. Don't calculate it, don't tell me. But it's been a while. And I can tell you this, it always changes. The Republicans come and go, the Democrats come and go, the conservatives come and go, the liberals come and go. You think you have a victory and it's gone 4 years from now or 8 years from now. You think you have a loss and it changes around 4 years from now. If you set all your hopes on politics, you will live on a roller coaster. And I'm telling you tonight, get off the roller coaster. Don't put your hopes in politics. Be involved, be informed, vote, but trust Jesus.